The psychiatrist handed me the prescription and said I had delusional disorder. My husband nodded like he'd been expecting this diagnosis, like it confirmed everything he'd been saying about me for months. I sat there in that office, staring at the paper that officially declared me mentally ill, and some tiny part of my brain was screaming that this wasn't right, that I wasn't crazy, that something was very wrong with this entire situation. But that tiny voice got drowned out by the medications they put me on. Pills that turned my brain into fog, that made me move through the world like I was underwater. That stole almost a year of my life while my husband lived his double life in plain sight. I wasn't delusional. I was right. He was cheating on me with our housekeeper's 20-year-old daughter, and he convinced a doctor to diagnose me as insane to cover it up. Let me tell you how that happened, because if you're sitting there thinking this kind of thing only happens in movies, girl, I need you to understand how easy it is for a man with the right credentials and the right authority to make everyone believe his wife is crazy when she is actually just noticing the truth. It started the way these things always start, with me noticing something was off. My husband was military battalion commander, the kind of guy everyone respected. Church every Sunday, volunteer work, coach Little League, the whole picture-perfect life. We had 2 kids, a nice house near the base, that military family stability everyone talks about. From the outside, we looked like we had it all figured out, and for 8 years, I thought we did. Sure, military life has its challenges. Long hours, deployment stress, that rigid structure that bleeds into home life. But we managed. We were a team. Or so I thought. Things changed after his promotion. He started working later, coming home with stories about battalion issues that needed his attention. At first, it seemed normal. Commanders do put in crazy hours. But then I started noticing patterns. Every Thursday night, like clockwork, he had to work late. And certain weekends, sudden emergencies that somehow never affected anyone else we knew. The explanations were always detailed and plausible, but they started to feel rehearsed. Like he'd practiced exactly what he'd say before he came home. I mentioned it one night. Nothing accusatory, just casual observation. Thursdays are always intense at work, huh? The way his face changed, I'll never forget it. This coldness came over him, this look that said I just violated some unspoken rule. You're keeping track of my schedule, Mal? His voice was flat, dangerous. No, I just noticed a pattern. I felt confused, defensive, like I'd started a fight over nothing when I'd just been making conversation. Looking back now, after everything, I can see that moment was the beginning. The first brick in the wall he was building between me and reality, but I didn't understand that then. I just felt off balance, uncertain why a casual observation had turned into conflict. And the more I noticed, the more things didn't add up. Like the Thursday, I drove past the base around 8 p.m. because our daughter forgot something at school. The parking lot was almost empty. No late-night operations, no emergency situations. Just a few scattered cars where hundreds usually parked during the day. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I mentioned it to a friend who'd been through her own marriage problems. She told me to trust my instincts, suggested I talk to our housekeeper who'd been with us for 6 years and knew our routines better than anyone. That conversation changed everything. I don't want to speak out of turn, she finally said, but maybe you should pay attention to Thursday evenings. But the way she said it, the concern in her voice, I knew she was trying to warn me. So I did what any wife would do when something feels wrong, but she can't name it yet. I followed him. That Thursday, I told him I was taking the kids to my mother's. Instead, I dropped them at a friend's house and parked down the street from her home, waiting to see where he went for his supposed late shift. He didn't drive toward the base. He headed to an apartment complex 20 minutes from our house, one of those newer buildings near the mall. Sat in his car for a few minutes like he was checking something on his phone, then got out and walked into a ground floor unit. I watched from my car, heart pounding, not quite able to believe what I was seeing, but knowing exactly what it meant. He was inside for almost 2 hours. Nobody else came or went. Just him in that apartment, doing something he'd lied to me about. When I couldn't stand sitting there anymore, I drove home, put the kids to bed, and waited for him to come back from his fake work emergency. He got home around 11, looking exactly like he always did after these nights. A little tired, ready to decompress, completely normal. I kept my voice steady when I asked how work had been. Exhausting. I'm interested in your day. That's what married people do, right? Talk about their days. It's different when the questions feel like interrogation, he said. You've been acting weird lately. Critical, suspicious, questioning everything. Is something going on with you? And just like that, he flipped it. Made my reasonable question into evidence that something was wrong with me. That's called gaslighting, by the way. Makes you feel crazy for noticing things that are actually happening. I didn't know that term back then. I just knew I suddenly felt like I was the one being unreasonable, but I wasn't ready to back down yet. I drove past the base tonight. The parking lot was empty. Didn't look like any major situation was happening. His face went blank. Just for a second, I saw panic flash across his expression. Then it was gone, replaced by this concerned, almost pitying look. That's 15 miles away. The fact that you're driving around checking on me, creating scenarios in your head, that's concerning. That's paranoid behavior. I'm not paranoid. I'm paying attention. To what? To suspicions that have no basis in reality? To beliefs that I'm lying, even though I've never given you reason not to trust me? He sat down, looking at me with what seemed like genuine worry. I think you need to talk to someone. This level of distrust isn't normal. It isn't healthy. And I had seen him go to an apartment, but I didn't actually know what he'd been doing there. Because it's not based on anything I'm actually doing wrong. That night, lying beside him while he slept peacefully, I replayed everything over and over. Had I been unreasonable? Was I creating problems that didn't exist? Was my view of reality actually distorted? That's the trap. Once someone plants that seed of doubt about your own judgment, it grows. You start second-guessing everything you see, everything you feel, everything you know. He'd been inside for 2 hours. Something was happening, even if I couldn't prove what. So I kept watching. Phone calls he'd taken in another room, speaking too quietly for me to hear. Every time I mentioned anything, he'd explain it away while suggesting my noticing indicated something wrong with me. The restaurant charges were business meals. He deleted everyone's text that was normal phone management. The cologne was new grooming standards at work. The private calls were confidential battalion business. And always, he'd circle back to concern about my mental state. You're obsessing over nothing. That's not rational thinking. After months of this, I genuinely started wondering if I was losing my mind. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe my perception really was distorted. Maybe I needed help. That's when he suggested I see a psychiatrist. Just to talk things through, he said gently. Get a professional perspective on why you're feeling so anxious. There's no shame in needing support. A lot of military spouses struggle with this lifestyle. He'd already made the appointment with a psychiatrist who worked with military families. He even took time off to drive me there, which seemed supportive at the time. Caring husband making sure his struggling wife got help. What I didn't know was that he'd met with a psychiatrist the week before, without me. Spent an hour describing a wife becoming increasingly paranoid and delusional, convinced he was cheating despite zero evidence. Painted me as obsessive, irrational, possibly experiencing a mental break. The doctor was primed to see me as unstable before I ever walked into his office. The appointment was strange. Every concern I raised about my husband's behavior, the psychiatrist would frame in a way that made me sound irrational. And you followed your husband to verify where he was going? When he put it that way, it did sound extreme. I noticed his workplace was empty when he said there was a crisis. I tried to explain. I left feeling worse than when I arrived, more confused about whether my perceptions were accurate or if I really was becoming paranoid. My husband was understanding when I got home. What did he say? He wants to see me again next week. He thinks I might have anxiety issues. That makes sense. This is good. You're getting help. We'll figure this out together. Over the next month, I had 4 more appointments. Each one left me more uncertain about my own mind. The psychiatrist introduced the possibility that I might be experiencing delusional thinking, that my brain was creating scenarios that felt real but weren't based in evidence. Delusions can be very compelling, he explained. To the person experiencing them, they feel absolutely true. But objectively, these beliefs aren't supported by reality. He prescribed medication, said it would help with the anxiety and intrusive thoughts. I didn't want to take it. Maybe I did need medication. Maybe my brain really was creating problems that didn't exist. The pills made everything fuzzy. I'd take them at night, and the next day I'd move through the world wrapped in cotton. Everything felt distant and unclear. I forgot things constantly, lost track of what I was doing, struggled with basic tasks. My husband was patient with my medication fog. He'd remind me to take the pills every night, help me remember appointments. He took over household management, handled finances entirely, made decisions about the kids' schedules and our social calendar. You focus on getting better, he'd say. Let me handle everything else. And I was grateful. Because thinking was so hard, functioning felt impossible, and having him manage things meant I didn't have to struggle through tasks I couldn't complete. Eliminating my ability to think clearly enough to recognize my original instincts had been right. Missing moments with my kids because I couldn't focus. Letting him control every aspect of our lives because I couldn't manage my own thoughts anymore. The medication made me docile, compliant, easy to manage, which I now understand was exactly the point. Because while I was barely functioning, drifting through medicated days, he was living his other life, seeing her, the girl who was young enough to be his daughter, our housekeeper's daughter. I didn't find out until much later, but he'd been involved with her for over a year before I started noticing things were off. He was 43, and our housekeeper, her mother, had no idea her daughter was sleeping with a man whose house she cleaned 3 times a week. The affair had been going on right under all our noses. Business lunches that were actually hotel visits. A whole secret life running parallel to our family life. And when I started noticing inconsistencies, started asking questions, started following him, he didn't end the affair or come clean. He convinced a psychiatrist to diagnose me as delusional and put me on medications that kept me too foggy to keep investigating. That's a special kind of cruelty. Not just cheating, but systematically destroying your wife's grip on reality to cover it up. Making her believe she's insane so you can keep doing what you're doing without consequence. I might have stayed in that medicated fog indefinitely if not for a chance encounter that changed everything. There's this man who worked at the base. Civilian contractor, cleaned the administrative buildings a few times a week. Quiet guy, kept to himself mostly, but always friendly when you'd see him around. He'd worked there for years, long enough that everyone knew him, even if they didn't really know him, if that makes sense. One afternoon, I was at the bakery near our house. The contractor from the base sat down heavily, grateful because standing was taking more effort than I had. He sat across from me, still looking concerned. I almost didn't recognize you, he said carefully. Are you feeling all right? I tried to smile, tried to give the response I've been trained to give when people express concern. I'm fine. Just dealing with some health stuff, nothing serious. But he kept looking at me with that worried expression, and something about his kindness, about being seen by someone who wasn't part of my husband's carefully constructed narrative, broke something loose in me. Can I ask you something? I said, my medicated brain struggling to form the question. I just wondered if there was something major going on that would explain it. The contractor was quiet for a moment. Then he said very gently, "Ma'am, I clean those offices 3 nights a week. Your husband's office is usually empty by 6. I haven't seen signs of any late-night operations or weekend emergencies." The fog in my brain cleared just enough for that information to register, to understand what it meant. "Oh," I said softly. We sat there in silence while I processed what he just confirmed. That the late nights weren't about work. That I hadn't been delusional or paranoid. The contractor asked, "At home, I mean, are you safe?" The question surprised me. "I don't know," I admitted. "This is my number. If you ever need help, call one of those numbers, okay?" I took the card, held it like it was something precious, which it was. It was the first real help anyone had offered me in over a year. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I've seen this before. Someone who looks like they're drowning and nobody else seems to notice. Just tears running down my face while this stranger sat across from me at a bakery table and didn't try to fix it or make me stop. Just let me cry and handed me napkins when I needed them. After a while, I asked, "What's your name?" "Sam," he said. "Everyone calls me Uncle Sam because of the contractor badge I wear." Kind of a joke, but it stuck. "Thank you, Sam," I said. "You're not crazy," he said firmly. "I don't know what's going on in your situation, but I know you're not crazy. And whatever medications you're on that are making you look like this, you need to talk to a different doctor about whether you actually need them." That conversation lasted maybe 20 minutes, but it changed everything. Because Sam had confirmed what I'd known before the gaslighting started. The battalion wasn't having emergencies. My husband was lying. My perception of reality had been accurate all along. I went home and didn't take my medication that night, or the next night, or the night after that. My husband didn't notice at first because I'd pretend to take the pills and hide them. And slowly, over about 2 weeks, the fog started lifting. As my head cleared, I could see everything more sharply. Could remember details I'd been too medicated to process. Could think through what had been happening to me and understand it was deliberate. My husband hadn't just cheated. He had weaponized psychiatry to control me. Had convinced a doctor to diagnose me as delusional and prescribe medications that kept me dependent and compliant. All of it real, all of it evidence, none of it delusion. But I also understood something important. If I confronted him now, he'd just force the medication on me again. Maybe more of it, maybe different kinds. I'd seen his face that first time when I'd questioned his schedule. I knew what he was capable of when he felt threatened. So I couldn't just confront him. I needed help. I called the number Sam had written on that card. A woman answered. She listened without interrupting, without expressing shock, without making me feel dramatic or crazy. Therapists who understood trauma and abuse. Most importantly, she said they'd help me document everything and, if I wanted, report the situation to proper authorities. "Your husband is a battalion commander," she said. "That means he's held to higher standards of conduct. What he's done, both the affair and the coercive control, those are violations of military law and civilian law. If you want to pursue that, we can help you build a case." I did want to pursue it. Because he'd stolen a year of my life. Because he'd made me believe I was losing my mind. Because he'd used his position and authority to manipulate a doctor into medicating me for a disorder I didn't have. Because he'd hurt me in ways that left no visible bruises but damaged me just as severely as if he had. They helped me find a different doctor who evaluated me properly and confirmed I didn't have delusional disorder. Documentation of the psychiatric visits and medications. Written accounts of the gaslighting, the control, the systematic undermining of my reality. And they helped me find out who he'd been seeing. which is how I learned it was our housekeeper's 20-year-old daughter. How I learned the affair had been going on for over a year. Who I'd asked for help identifying my husband's strange behavior had been trying to warn me without directly telling me her daughter was involved. Military investigators, civilian authorities, my advocates, all working together to ensure my safety and document the situation properly. They confronted my husband at work, presented evidence of the affair, which violated military regulations, presented evidence of the coercive control and medical abuse, confronted the psychiatrist about his failure to properly evaluate me before diagnosis, his collusion with my husband in prescribing unnecessary medications. My husband tried to deny it, said I was mentally unstable, that this was all part of my delusional thinking, but the investigators had evidence. They had my medical records from the new doctor. They had phone records and financial documents. They had testimony from Sam. They had a statement from our housekeeper's daughter. Got therapy to process what had been done to me. Slowly rebuilt my sense of trust in my own perceptions. The outcome was thorough. My husband was court-martialed for conduct unbecoming an officer, fraternization violations, and several related military charges. He was also charged in civilian court with coercive control and medical abuse for prescribing medications I didn't need. The military takes these things seriously when they can't be covered up, when there's documentation and witnesses and clear evidence of misconduct. My husband went from respected battalion commander to disgraced former officer serving time in a military prison. But more importantly, I got validation that I hadn't been crazy, that my instincts had been right, that everything I'd noticed and questioned had been real. The medication they'd put me on, once I stopped taking it, properly supervised by a real doctor, cleared out of my system completely. My head cleared, my memory sharpened. I could think again, function again, be present for my children again. That year I'd spent in the fog felt like time stolen from me. About how easily someone with authority can manipulate systems to control another person. One person offering help without judgment can be the lifeline that saves everything. Sam didn't have to stop me in that bakery. Didn't have to ask if I was okay, give me his number, connect me with resources. And he'd done something about it. Not in a way that put me at risk or forced me to act before I was ready. Just offered help and let me decide when and how to use it. I think about Sam a lot now. Instead, I'm on the other side of it. Rebuilding my life with my kids, working again, pursuing the education my husband had told me I wasn't smart enough to complete. Proving every day that I'm exactly as capable as I always was. That the only thing wrong with me was that I'd been married to someone who needed me to be broken so he could maintain control. I tell my story now to other women, other military spouses specifically, because I want them to know that if something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Even when your abuser has authority and respect, and everyone believes his version instead of yours. Even when it feels hopeless and impossible and like you'll never be free. Help exists. People like Sam exist. People who notice and care and offer support without judgment. Advocates exist who understand these situations and know how to navigate them safely. Legal systems exist that can hold abusers accountable when there's proper documentation. You're not too far gone. You're not too dependent. You're not too broken. You're not actually crazy, even if someone has convinced a doctor to say you are. It requires help and resources and patience with yourself, but it's possible. I'm living proof. Now I need to tell you something else. Something I've been thinking about how to say because it's heavy and I don't want to make this heavier than it already is. But it needs to be said. During that year when I was medicated, when everything was foggy and I couldn't think straight, times when the pain of feeling crazy, of not being able to trust my own mind, of being trapped in a life I couldn't escape, felt like too much to bear. I never made plans, never got close to acting on those thoughts, but they were there. And I'm telling you this because if you're in a situation like I was, if someone has convinced you you're crazy or broken or too much trouble, if you're isolated and dependent and can't see a way out, those thoughts might visit you too. Please don't listen to them. You're a person who's being systematically hurt by someone who benefits from your suffering. And removing yourself isn't the solution. Removing the abuser's access to you is the solution. I know it doesn't feel that simple when you're living in it. I know the isolation and the medication and the constant undermining of your reality make it feel like there's no way forward, but there is. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7. So are military family services. So are advocates who specialize in exactly these situations. They've seen it before, they know how to help, and they won't judge you or make you prove you're suffering enough to deserve support. You deserve support just for being in pain. You don't have to earn rescue by suffering perfectly or documenting abuse comprehensively or waiting until things get bad enough to justify leaving. If something feels wrong, that's enough. Reach out to resources designed specifically for these situations. Let people who understand abuse help you find a way forward. Because your story doesn't have to end with you believing your abuser's lies. It can end with you free, healthy, validated, rebuilt. Living the life you deserve instead of the half-life someone forced you into for their convenience. That's the ending I want for every person who hears my story and recognizes parts of their own life in it. That you survived, that you rebuilt, that you're stronger than they ever wanted you to be. That's my ending. Went back to my maiden name, Reyes, Christina Reyes. The person I was before I met him, before military life, before I learned that people with authority and respect can still be abusers who weaponize systems to control their victims. Christina Reyes, that rank doesn't equal character, that someone can wear a uniform and serve their country while being a monster at home. My kids are doing well, by the way. That's something people always want to know, because I'm healthy now and present now and able to parent them properly instead of being medicated into fog. Because they see me pursuing education and rebuilding my life and proving that leaving abuse leads to something better, not something worse. They miss parts of their old life, the stability, the routine, having their father around. And they're learning at younger ages than I wish they had to, that love doesn't look like control. That someone being respected publicly doesn't mean they're safe privately. That if something feels wrong in a relationship, it probably is wrong. Those are hard lessons, but they're important ones. When it would have been easier to look away and mind his business. He tells me he wishes he'd noticed sooner. Said he'd seen me around the base before, always put together, engaged, friendly. Then over several months noticed I was looking progressively worse, more withdrawn, more medicated. But he wasn't sure if it was appropriate to say something, wasn't sure if he was overstepping. But something made him stop, made him ask if I was okay, made him offer help anyway. I tell him I'm grateful he listened to that instinct, that he didn't talk himself out of getting involved, that he understood sometimes the most important thing you can do is notice someone who's suffering and offer them a way out. He's helped other people since then, seen signs of abuse or control in other military families and connected them with resources. Not forcing intervention, not making decisions for people, just quietly offering information and letting them choose when and how to use it. That's the kind of heroism nobody talks about. Sam didn't think of himself as doing anything special. He was just a guy who cleaned offices and happened to recognize that a woman he'd seen around the base was clearly in trouble. That simple act of noticing, of caring enough to say something, changed the entire trajectory of my life. Maybe I would have eventually figured it out on my own. Or maybe I would have stayed trapped indefinitely, getting worse instead of better, losing more years to medications I didn't need, and gaslighting I couldn't escape. I don't know which version would have happened. I'm just grateful I don't have to find out. The legal process took almost 2 years from start to finish. Military courts move slowly, especially when the accused has rank and connections. My husband tried every defense his lawyers could construct. Said I was unstable and vindictive, that the affair was consensual between adults. Testimony from the young woman involved showed he'd lied to her about our marriage being over, manipulated her with his authority and position. Sam's testimony confirmed my husband's supposed work emergencies were fabricated. Discussing my treatment in ways that made it clear the doctor knew he was helping control me rather than actually providing mental health care. Text exchanges about medication dosages that would keep me manageable. Discussions about diagnoses that would justify continued prescriptions. That evidence destroyed any claim my husband had that he'd been acting in good faith. Showed the conspiracy between him and the psychiatrist to use mental health treatment as a weapon of control. That he'd trusted the commander's description of my symptoms without properly verifying them himself. But medical ethics require independent evaluation. The psychiatrist lost his medical license. I lost a year of my life to medications that stole my ability to think clearly, to be present for my children, to function as myself. The math doesn't add up. The justice doesn't balance the harm. But it's something. It's acknowledgement that what happened to me was wrong, criminal, unacceptable. It's validation that I wasn't crazy, that my perceptions were accurate, that I was a victim of systematic abuse rather than a delusional wife who couldn't handle military life. That validation mattered more than I can fully express. Makes you question your own judgment so completely that having external confirmation you were right restores something fundamental. Your trust in yourself, your confidence in your perceptions, your understanding that you're not the problem. The young woman involved, our housekeeper's daughter, also faced consequences, though not legal ones. Because that's what my husband was, a man in his 40s pursuing a 20-year-old. Using his authority and position to manipulate her, lying about his circumstances to get what he wanted. That he was waiting for the right time to leave. She believed she was in a real relationship with a man who loved her, not an affair with a married commander who was using her. When the truth came out, she was humiliated, angry, hurt. But we did have one conversation, facilitated by the advocates helping both of us, where we acknowledged we'd both been victims of the same manipulative man. She apologized for her part in hurting me, but the power imbalance meant his culpability was greater, his betrayal worse, his consequences more deserved. I hope she's okay now. Hope she learned from what happened and won't let herself be manipulated like that again. Hope she understands she deserved better than being someone's secret. Someone's lie, someone's escape from accountability. Our housekeeper, her mother, quit, obviously. Couldn't keep working for a family where her daughter had been involved with the husband. She'd been trying to warn me without explicitly betraying her daughter's confidence. Had hoped I'd figure it out from her cryptic comments about paying attention to Thursday evenings. That I didn't blame her for being caught between loyalty to her daughter and loyalty to me. That her attempt to warn me, however indirect, had been part of what kept me paying attention, even when I was being gaslit into doubting myself. These are the complicated pieces of recovery that nobody tells you about. It's not just the abuser who caused harm. The military structure that gave him authority and credibility, the social expectations that made everyone assume a battalion commander couldn't possibly be an abuser. And it's the people caught in the middle who had impossible choices. Rosa trying to protect her daughter while also trying to warn me. The young woman who thought she was in a relationship but was actually being manipulated. Sam who had to decide if speaking to me crossed professional boundaries or was necessary intervention. None of them were villains. They were just people navigating complicated situations where someone with power was using that power to hurt others and hide it. The real villain was my husband, and to a lesser extent, the psychiatrist who violated his professional ethics to help my husband maintain control. They made choices with full knowledge of what they were doing and why. I think a lot about the version of myself that existed before all this happened. The woman I was 8 years into what I thought was a good marriage. Happy enough, stable, not expecting my life to detonate the way it did. That version of me didn't know about gaslighting or coercive control or medical abuse. Didn't understand how someone could weaponize psychiatry. Didn't realize how thoroughly isolation works to trap victims. Didn't know that respectable, successful people could be abusers who hid their true nature behind public reputation. If I could talk to that earlier version of myself, I'd tell her to trust her instincts. That someone who responds to "where were you?" with "why are you so paranoid?" is deflecting, not answering. That making you doubt your sanity is a tactic, not proof you're actually losing your mind. I'd tell her to document everything from the start. But because writing things down helps you see patterns, helps you trust your memory when someone's trying to convince you your memory is faulty. Most of all, I'd tell her she's not crazy, that her perceptions are accurate, that what she's noticing is real, and the person telling her otherwise is lying for his own benefit. But I couldn't tell that earlier version of myself any of those things. And now I tell other women instead, hoping they'll hear the warnings I couldn't hear, recognize the patterns I couldn't see until I was trapped in them. The statistics about intimate partner abuse in military families are higher than civilian populations. Most battalion commanders aren't manipulating their wives with fake psychiatric diagnoses. Most soldiers and officers and contractors are decent people trying to serve their country and take care of their families. The military structure just gave him additional tools for control, authority, respect, access to systems he could manipulate. I say this because I don't want other military families to hear my story and think this is typical or inevitable. It's not. Most military marriages don't involve psychiatric abuse. Most commanders don't use their position to cover affairs and control spouses. But the fact that it can happen, that the structures exist for it to happen, means people need to be aware and vigilant. Need to understand that rank doesn't equal righteousness. That someone can be respected professionally while being abusive privately. That authority figures aren't immune to accountability when they harm their families. The military actually handled my case relatively well once it couldn't be covered up. They investigated thoroughly, prosecuted appropriately, imposed meaningful consequences. The system worked, eventually, when enough evidence existed that they couldn't ignore it. But I also know many military spouse abuse cases don't end with justice. Too many commanders protect their own. Too many investigations get buried. Too many victims are told to keep quiet for the sake of unit cohesion or military readiness. I was lucky, in a terrible way, that I had comprehensive evidence and credible witnesses and advocates who knew how to navigate military systems, that Sam had noticed and cared, that the young woman involved cooperated once she understood she'd been manipulated, that the psychiatrist's messages were recoverable and damning. Without all those pieces, my husband might have gotten away with it, might have continued the affair, continued controlling me with medications, continued his respectable commander persona while destroying his wife in private. That's the scary part. How easily it could have gone differently. How many pieces had to fall into place for me to escape and get justice. And that makes me wonder about all the cases that don't have those pieces. All the military spouses being abused right now by partners who are better at hiding it, who haven't left evidence, who haven't been noticed by anyone like Sam. All the victims who don't have access to good advocates or don't know resources exist or are too isolated to reach out for help. How many women are being told they're crazy right now? How many are being medicated inappropriately to make them easier to control? How many are living in that fog I lived in, losing years of their lives while their abusers maintain perfect public images? I don't have answers to those questions. Just awareness that my story is one of many, and many others don't end with escape and justice. They end with continued suffering, with victims who never get validation, with abusers who face no consequences. That reality makes me angry, makes me committed to telling my story loudly and often, to helping other survivors access resources and support, to pushing for better systems that catch this abuse earlier and respond more effectively. Because what happened to me shouldn't have been possible. A military commander shouldn't be able to collude with a psychiatrist to have his wife inappropriately medicated. That should trigger alarms, should face oversight, should be caught by safeguards that apparently don't exist or don't function properly. Similarly, a 20-year-old shouldn't be accessible to predatory behavior by men in their 40s who have authority over her mother's employment. That power imbalance should be recognized and prevented, not ignored until it explodes into scandal. The systems failed at multiple points in my situation, and those systemic failures suggest other victims are falling through the same cracks, facing the same lack of protection, suffering the same way I suffered because nobody caught it or stopped it or intervened. Fixing those systems requires more than individual survivors telling their stories. It requires institutional change, policy reform, better training for everyone who encounters potential abuse situations. It requires taking domestic violence as seriously as military readiness, treating spouse welfare as connected to overall military effectiveness rather than separate from it. But institutional change happens slowly, if at all. So in the meantime, the best I can do is tell my story and hope it helps someone recognize their own situation. Reach out for help, escape before they lose as much time as I did. If you're reading this or hearing this and something resonates, if you're thinking that sounds like my relationship, or my partner does that too, or I've been told I'm crazy for noticing things, please understand you're not alone. What's happening to you has a name. It's called abuse, specifically coercive control and gaslighting when it's psychological rather than physical. And it's real and damaging even when it doesn't leave visible bruises. You're not too sensitive. You're not overreacting. You're not crazy or paranoid or delusional. You're noticing real patterns and real problems, and the person telling you otherwise is lying to maintain power over you. And you can get out. It won't be easy or simple or safe without proper support, but resources exist specifically for situations like yours. People who understand these dynamics and know how to help. Systems that can protect you and hold your abuser accountable when you're ready to use them. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. They're available 24/7. They understand abuse dynamics, and they can connect you with local resources and support. Military One Source is 1-800-3429-647 for military-connected families specifically. They have counselors who understand military culture and can navigate those specific systems. And if you're reading this and you're not being abused, but you know someone who might be, please be like Sam. Notice when something seems wrong. Ask if people are okay. Offer help without forcing it. Give information about resources and let them choose when to use it. Your willingness to see and care and offer support might be the difference between someone staying trapped or finding a way out. My life now is unrecognizable from what it was during that year of medication fog. I'm getting my master's degree in social work, specializing in trauma and domestic violence. Planning to work with military families specifically because I understand that world and its unique challenges. My kids are thriving. They adjusted better than I expected to the divorce and their father's absence. Turns out children are remarkably resilient when the toxic element gets removed and the remaining parent is healthy and present. I'm in a new relationship, though I took years before I was ready for that. Had to heal, had to relearn trust, had to understand my patterns and triggers, and make sure I wouldn't repeat the dynamic that nearly destroyed me. My current partner is nothing like my ex-husband. He's not military, doesn't have authority issues, doesn't need control to feel secure. When I tell him I'm uncomfortable with something, he listens and adjusts his behavior instead of telling me I'm being too sensitive. When I have concerns, he addresses them directly instead of making me doubt my perception. It's shockingly different from what I thought relationships were supposed to be. Turns out healthy partnerships don't involve constant anxiety, don't require walking on eggshells, don't make you question your own sanity. I still have trauma responses sometimes. Certain triggers, certain patterns that make me hypervigilant or defensive. I'm working through those with a therapist who specializes in abuse recovery. It's ongoing work, not something that gets completely resolved and then you're fine forever, but I'm free. That's the important part. Free to think clearly, to trust my perceptions, to make my own decisions, to live without someone systematically undermining my reality. And I'm using that freedom to help other people find theirs. Speaking at military spouse events, writing about my experience, consulting with organizations that support abuse survivors, training advocates who work with victims going through what I went through. My pain has purpose now. My survival means something beyond just me getting out. It's a roadmap for others, proof that escape is possible. Evidence that even when abuse is sophisticated and hidden and enabled by powerful systems, victims can still find justice. That's what I want you to take away from my story, if nothing else. Not that abuse is inevitable, or that all military commanders are dangerous, or that you should be paranoid in your relationships. Just that if something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. That trusting yourself matters, even when someone with authority and credibility is telling you not to. That asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That getting out is possible, even when it seems impossible. And that people like Sam exist. People who notice and care and help without needing anything in return. People who understand that sometimes the most important thing you can do is pay attention to someone who's drowning and offer them a lifeline. I'm grateful every day that Sam offered me that lifeline, that he didn't talk himself out of getting involved, that he saw me in that bakery looking like a ghost of myself and decided to care anyway. I'm grateful for the advocates who helped me navigate systems I didn't understand. For the second psychiatrist who properly evaluated me and validated my reality. For the investigators who took my case seriously and built comprehensive evidence. For the prosecutors who held my husband accountable instead of protecting him. I'm grateful for my kids who forgave me for the year I was absent, even while physically present, who adapted to massive changes in their lives, who learned from watching me rebuild that leaving abuse is survival, not failure. I'm grateful for my current partner who loves me patiently through my healing process, who understands triggers and trauma without taking them personally, who proves every day that healthy relationships are possible after abuse. And I'm grateful for myself, for the stubbornness that kept me noticing things even when I was being gaslit, for the part of me that didn't take the medication those last 2 weeks before reaching out for help, for the courage to tell my story to strangers in the hope it helps someone else. That's who I am now. Christina Reyes, survivor and advocate. Living proof that you can escape even sophisticated abuse. Living proof that justice is possible even against powerful abusers. Living proof that the person you were before abuse tried to destroy you is still there waiting to be reclaimed. Your story doesn't have to end the way your abuser wants it to end. It can end with you free and healthy and using your survival to help others. It can end with your abuser facing consequences instead of getting away with it. It can end with you remembering who you are underneath all the lies you've been told about yourself. That ending is possible, hard but possible, and worth every difficult step it takes to get there. That's my story. That's my truth. That's my gift to anyone who needs to hear it. You're not crazy. You're not alone. You're not stuck forever. You can get out. You can heal. You can rebuild. And someday, if you choose, you can help someone else do the same.